Corey in just a second. Before we begin, though, Steve Rankin has an announcement.
Southwestern College in Winfield, Kansas has a 2-year visiting scholar program, and they're looking for applicants. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, I'd be glad to talk to you. Southwestern College is a United Methodist affiliated school in Winfield, Kansas, southern Kansas, south of Wichita. The purpose of the visiting scholar is to help someone get some teaching experience if they need that. If they're trying to finish a dissertation, there's dissertation completion assistance. If you finish the dissertation and you'd just like to have some undergraduate college teaching experience and a place to kind of get your feet wet in this sort of work, it's really it's a good place to be. There's a stipend and housing provided. And Stephen Sowers was one of the visiting fellows, along with her visiting scholars, along with Sarah. So probably talk to Steve. I don't know if he might not say good things about it. I should have checked with him first. Yeah, Wendy was a visiting scholar too, Wendy Mulder-Sykes. So a couple of people here who could tell you about their experience, and I'd be glad to talk to you as well. Siglers, yes, thank you. Okay, enough of that. Check it out.
It is a very good supportive program. Steve Rankin told us about the program. Actually, Steve Moore told us about the program, and then we talked with Steve Rankin, and Steve Rankin told me at a WTS meeting that Sarah and I got the fellowship, and then he went off to SMU. So I was excited to go be with Steve, and then he left me. We're going to dive into our presentation, Q&A discussion, in that order. I'm going to introduce Dr. David Corey, and he is then going to spend about 15 minutes giving you the overview of his article. Perhaps you have had time to read it, Politics, Friendship, and the Search for Meaning. If you only had time to skim it, or you didn't have time, that's okay, we're going to talk about it. After his presentation, he and I will have about 15 minutes of a discussion between us, and then we're going to open it up to you. So that's the format. David Corey is Professor of Political Science in the Honors Program at Baylor University. I won't give you his whole list of bio and all of that, but his research and writing is in the area of political theory, and that includes the just war tradition. The article for today is on the, I guess I would say the sort of conflict or the tension between politics and friendship. What ought to go together is not going together at the moment, and that's what he's going to talk about. So thank you very much, and take it away.
Let me see. Oh, good, it's on. Nice to see you all, and thank you, Stephen. That's an accurate description of the essay, which I suppose some of you have looked at, but not all of you. And so I don't want to be pedantic and say everything that's in it, but I want to give enough of a summary that folks who didn't get a chance to look at it closely will know what's going on in that essay. It was a tricky essay to write, actually, because I'm dealing with two concepts, politics and friendship, and it seems to me that we think we know what those are, but in fact they admit of a variety, each of them admits of a variety of different understandings. So in other words, it's possible to understand what politics is in different ways. And these different understandings, I think, have widespread consequences. And so too with friendship. We think we know what friendship is, but in fact there's friendship and then there are related kinds of relationship that come closer or further away from friendship. And so in the background of the essay, where I just want to mark the point of intersection between these two variables, behind the essay I have a lot of thinking about the two variables, and it can't come into an essay this short. So for example, I'm working on a larger project about how we can understand what politics is and how different understandings have consequences for the way we practice it and the sort of flavor of our social engagements. I might start, and so too with friendship, but I might start with politics and say, without even beginning to say the various different ways we can understand what politics is, we are mostly today settled into a way of understanding it as a form of war that is not sustainable. Just not sustainable. It might be that over the long history of a culture, this comes up as a temporary way of understanding politics. And I should define what I mean by war, because I think it's badly misunderstood if you think I mean we're on the brink of picking up weapons. Those certainly, there is political violence, even in America today, and we may be on the brink of picking up weapons. The Pew Foundation says that we've never been more polarized since the eve of the Civil War. But our differences are not actually geographically separated, or not cleanly geographically separated. Think rather, when politics is war, or the indication that you're thinking of it as war, it's not that you have weapons, it's that you think of eliminating your enemy. So it's a way of understanding the people that you're relating to. For the record, I think it's delusional. It's not possible to eliminate the enemy. At least it's not possible in any way that modern people would find palatable. Machiavelli has some suggestions about how you can do it, but it involves some pretty brutal things. So I think we think of politics increasingly in a utopian way, in which we're just one election or one Supreme Court justice away from unity on our terms. You follow? A sort of forced unity that denies the other side its power. And I do not think any such unity is forthcoming. I frankly don't think it's possible in our present pluralist age. That's why I think it's utopian. So the politics of war is justified by the dream of unity on our terms. But the dream of unity is not a credible end goal. And because it's not credible, the war to achieve it is not just. Pretty basic. It's delusional on both sides, the right and the left. So the thesis is that if you think about politics that way, that's going to have an effect on how you think about human relationships like friendship. And it doesn't seem that possible at first that the way you think about politics would affect your relationships, but I think we're far enough down the road now that everybody kind of gets that that's possible. People are losing friends over politics, and it's happening increasingly. Now, partly that's because of the way we understand friendship, and I'll get to it. But that is partly because of the way we understand what politics is. And in the essay, I try to show that when you think politics is a form of war, and when the war ratchets up to something we might say metaphorically is total war, and I don't know if you can follow me there, but in our present day politics, the scope of government is so vast, and the possibility of having government interference in various parts of our life, either for good or for ill, no matter what you think about the interference, it's increasingly everywhere, then no one can afford to lose this epic struggle for power to the other side. So it's no surprise to me that you start to see political kinds of relationships seeping into your church. This museum is not just a museum, it's a point of political contestation. Schools, the symphony, the ballet. It's saturating our culture, in part because the stakes are so high. And as generations come forward and don't know of any way of living in relationship other than this kind of fraught political battle footing, you see barriers falling down that used to be oases of calm and meaning amidst a smaller political domain, but it's becoming everything. So the point is that one danger is that as we become obsessed with politics, our human relationships start to look less like friendship as I'm about to describe it, and more like what I call allyship or comradeship. We don't always know we're doing it, But if our friends, and even long-term old friends, if they disagree with us on the political questions, we're inclined to marginalize them. And that's because of an understanding of human relationships, that the question is, are you good for helping us in this cause? Some of the pushback I've gotten from the essay from my friends on the right and the left, since it's been published, is, nice thought, David. The war is too serious. We'll have time for that later, right? And I think that's deeply mistaken. Yeah, I really do. So allyship is not friendship. And from the perspective of allyship, you can get a little glimpse into the rise of cancel culture. When people, you think they're a friend, but then they say something that's not good for the team, they're canceled. And I think some of the pain of realizing you've been canceled is, I've never been canceled because you can't cancel me from anything. I'm not very well known. It's kind of liberating, actually. But people thought they had real friends, and then they found out they were actually instruments, that they were being used as instruments. On the word instruments, one of the insights of the piece is an ancient distinction that I walk around with. It's very important to me, between an intrinsic good and an instrumental good. Politics is an instrumental good. It's never finished. It's always a battle for something. It's always a conversation or a deliberation for something. It's never done. Friendship is different. Genuine friendship. We could list some good things that come out of it, but that's not why you have it. It's actually intrinsically good. And the family of intrinsic goods is a very small family. I can't be exhaustive, but I can kind of list a whole bunch of them in very short order. Glorifying God, aesthetic delight, philosophical understanding, moral probity, love, play. I'm running out. There are not dozens of intrinsic goods. So one of the arguments behind the piece is that it's interesting. I have found, check this with your own experience, that where life becomes meaningful for you is when you're engaged, and most meaningful, is when you're engaged in intrinsic goods with other people. So when you're worshiping God together, you're looking at an aesthetic, you're sharing with somebody else something that's beautiful. You're living morally together, right? That generates meaning, and the more you think about it as a philosopher, the more you realize why it would generate meaning and that the instrumental goods wouldn't. The instrumental goods are for something else. So you don't get the meaning till you get to the something else. But if you're dealing with something like politics where the something else is perennially delayed, then I don't like to use the word like. It's as if you're suspended in midair, investing your meaning in something that will be meaningful when it's done, but it's never done. So, right, I mean, actually, instrumental goods can't deliver the kind of meaning that intrinsic goods can give. We're always wanting to get to the intrinsic goods, and we somehow don't allow ourselves to do it very much. It's a strange psychological phenomenon. We want to be engaged together in the institution of friendship, and we just somehow put other things, we put it off. So the real life is communal life around intrinsic goods. What I do with friendship in the piece is not just to differentiate it from allyship, but I think just as importantly is to differentiate it from companionship, which is an easier, less meaningful kind of relationship where we hang out together because you're pleasant to me right now. We don't invest a lot in it, and you can definitely tell when you and someone else are in a relationship of companionship, because it should not carry burdens. When you start asking your companions to show up for you to drive your kid to school when you're sick, they resent it. This was supposed to be for fun. We're not supposed to have any duties here. So I think we've started to lose sight of what the ancients showed us friendship is. It's a deep emotional connection to another person, so deep that if that other person isn't well, you can't possibly be well either, which means you can't have too many friends. I mean, I don't mean you should have tons of friends. You can't have tons of friends. You wouldn't have the freedom to live. By the way, there's an interesting question there that Stephen and I were batting around, and maybe it'll come up in discussion. What about the fact that as Christians we're called to love everyone? Agape. And I'm sitting here telling you that's not possible for us. So we can try to sort that out, because I think we are called to something real and something is possible, but we can't be best friends with people we don't know well or with too many people. I give a litmus test. It's kind of a somber one. How do you know you're really friends with someone? Their death would devastate you beyond belief. There are many people I hold dear. The world is not going to end if they die, but I would be sad. But what a small group of people whose death would absolutely devastate you, or whose emotional well-being or not well-being affects you so deeply that you can't act normally. So I try to single that out. The thesis is, in a culture that views politics as war, friendship will become allyship, and people will lose meaning. We should understand friendship to mean to value the intrinsic good of other people in relationship with us. And the last thesis of the essay is that maybe that could, in its own small way, change the way we approach politics. If we put the intrinsic good of friendship ahead of the instrumental relationships that we hold people in our present political climate, maybe that could make a difference. I don't expect it to be salvific, by the way, for us, but I think it could make a small difference that means a lot. So that's the essay. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Am I on time?
Perfect. Well,
You have given us quite a lot to talk about. The discussion is going to be rich. Before I dive into some specific comments about and questions about the piece, I wrote down who was your audience and what was the response, and you gave us the response about that. That was nice. So you have a lot of acquaintances and comrades and allies who thought your piece was nice. Who was your audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. It may be a surprising answer. The essay was on the lecture circuit before it made it to that form. And most of the times I was asked to give it, it was for conservative audiences. So I was originally asked to write that essay for a group called the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, ISI, out of Wilmington, Delaware. And I was watching young college-age kids, which is the constituency that they serve, becoming more and more vitriolic and unhappy. So I'm talking about pretty much the new right. And I wrote that essay for young people on the new right. Mm-hmm. That they would maybe understand that when you're approaching politics as war, that there are actually theological hazards for that, and the loss of friendship is one. Yeah. So I think it applies equally to the left. So many people have written and liked the essay that I think it must have touched on something that people feel, and not just young people on the new right. But that was the way in for me.
Okay, well, I thought the distinction between the instrumental good of politics and the intrinsic good of friendship was very helpful for me to think about. And I wrote down, if we use your understanding of friendship, we shouldn't be losing friends over politics. Our friendships ought to constrain our politics. If we really love, if our friendship is between, if love is the bond in this friendship such that if they died I would be devastated, that ought to constrain my instrumental use of some good that can never be achieved. That doesn't quite happen. Or it's in danger of being lost.
Question mark?
Do you think I'm right in interpreting you on that?
I think Christians should especially feel bad about this because of the utopian dream that seems to be animating the politics of war. I don't think it squares with the end game as we know it. So I'm shifting to political theology here. What is it that you think you're going to accomplish by approaching politics that way? Did you think you were going to win? Seriously. That's not the way the story goes. In anything but a Pelagian kind of a political theological eschatology. So to lose a friend over a dream that you're going to affect the salvation of our country through some political work that you yourself are doing, again, is delusional. So I think that ultimately for Christians, there's a theological diagnosis here that we should feel especially worried about.
Okay, yes, so I am interpreting you in that direction, which is great. I want to share a quotation with the group that jumped out at me, and just love to hear you sort of reflect on that. This is from page 13. Our contemporary inability to practice genuine friendship is a catastrophe from an ethical point of view. That's a scary word, catastrophe. Our contemporary inability to practice genuine friendship is a catastrophe from an ethical point of view. That is because friendship is one of the few activities that can address our natural feelings of incompleteness. And we are in danger of subordinating that to political victory.
Yes, and this is sort of a 20th century fear echoed again, but a people that profoundly lacks meaning and belonging. It's not that the desire for meaning and belonging go away. They find avenues that are there. And if political unity or a political movement or an ideological movement is there as a quasi friend and a quasi meaning giver and even a quasi religion, an ersatz religion, young people will flock to it to the extent that they're desperately seeking something to belong to. So as we see an eclipse of meaningful friendships, we should expect to see a rise of political movements that promise a kind of transcending above yourself and joining with others. And I see that as incredibly dangerous. I think that we should know better from the 20th century.
Okay, maybe we don't. Thinking about the lecture circuit that then became this piece, that's then going to become a larger project, the audience to which you originally wrote. Was there something in this work that you would do differently? A paragraph that you would rewrite? A point that you were trying to make that missed?
In all humility, I'd like to say there were tons. I happen to have a really good editor at that journal, Comment, who forced me to get it kind of just right. And there's not much in there. I can't think of anything in there I would want to change. It's a distillation of some very difficult philosophical topics that's come to a kind of an arrowhead point, thanks to this editor and the magazine itself. That's a much shorter thing than the talk that I was doing around on the circuit.
Right.
And so it's resulted in a kind of distilled, gem-like piece that I'm happy with as far as it goes. Of course, I'm not done exploring those topics. I think one thing that people
So what's
ought to
next
do,
then?
people ought to say, if you don't understand politics as war, then what are the other ways to understand it? And how do we get from here to there?
We could achieve a common good.
You're wanting to go down this road with me right now. Yeah.
I'm a theologian. That didn't seem like a hard question.
No, it is a hard question, only because our pluralism today challenges the concept of a common good. And we need a way of understanding politics that doesn't imitate this classic image of the body politic. And I think as Christians, we're incredibly drawn to an image of politics as the body of Christ, in which we're all participating as members. And that may have worked in ancient Athens, or Sparta, or for about 2 weeks in the book of Acts before the widows decided they weren't as happy, they weren't part of the body. But I think for a modern liberal regime that is necessarily pluralist, because freedom will lead to pluralism. By pluralism, I mean really radical different outlooks about what is the good. Not only for me, but for us. And I don't think we undo pluralism. So I think we really want to get to a language of politics as the common good, but we're going to have to think really hard about what goods are common now. They're few. There are common goods, but this won't look like a medieval politics of the common good.
No. And your reference to the widows in Acts is a good one. Didn't last long. So you bring up Aristotle at 3 or 4 points in your piece, but you seem to sort of. I'm going to move more to theology because I'm not so well versed in political theory. You seem to sort of move away from a common Christian understanding, Aristotelian, Augustinian understanding of friendship, which is sort of a triangle with virtue and God at the top and 2 friends. You mentioned Aristotle, but you really don't embrace that image. Was that intentional, or?
Do you understand the question? No. There's the classic view of friendship, classic not only in Greek philosophy, but I think St. Augustine picks this up, is that 2 friends are standing here being friends. But in the best case, what's really going on is that this friend knows God, and this friend knows God. And what they see in each other is their godliness. Okay? In Aristotle, it's the same image, except that what's at the top is a conception of human excellence, virtue. So our friendship is mediated by a common love, a common good. I think phenomenologically speaking, phenomenologically is a big word, I think in terms of just trying to account for the experience of friendship as it really is, that leaves something to be desired. I don't think that's an accurate description of most friendships, real friendships. That we're not all friends because we share a single thing. At any rate, in a pluralist society, that's going to be a pretty problematic way of thinking about things, because when I say pluralist, one of the things I mean is that we don't agree on the thing at the top. So does that mean in a pluralist society, we can't be friends? Or does it mean that this classical conception of friendship is wanting? And I've leaned the second way. I base it not on a theological, I don't deduce my view of friendship from a theological starting point. I induce my view of friendship from friendship and figure out what's going on. And I think it's possible to be full-on friends, where the thing you're loving isn't a common abstract metaphysical good, but the actual person. I think we do that all the time. I think I can deeply love, I lean right. I say that so you can make sense of this comment. I can deeply love a radical, progressive, LGBT advocate as a person, because in our relationships, this person has exhibited characteristics that I find lovely, and I want to be with that person. And I think that that's not just comradeship or companionship. I think it can develop into a deep sense of connectedness. So I do want to challenge the classical view, and I think it's high time we challenged it, because it can't serve us very well in this social pluralist society. And I think there's good reason, phenomenologically, to challenge it as an adequate account of friendship. And I'm not denying that there can be friends where what they have in common is God. So I'm not denying that there is that kind of friendship. I'm just saying all friendships are not like that, and by saying they're not, I'm not demoting the other kinds as being inferior.
Yes, that's great. And I think I agree with you on that.
It's something I find pleasant when people do.
I don't see why. I mean, if Christians were to recover a rich understanding of the Imago Dei, why does another human being have to have anything in common with me? Why can't I love them as a human being? No, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, but look how difficult your own formulation is.
What was it?
Well, because you are actually invoking something that in your mind holds us together as a common good. But you thinking about the Imago Dei with a friend who doesn't ever think about the Imago Dei and doesn't believe in it is the bridge I want to cross.
Yes. Well, they don't have to believe in it.
Okay.
Let me let's.
That could go on.
You keep making me think about political theory, so I'm going to make you think about theology here for a second. I was reading a paragraph from yours, and I teach a class on eschatology, and I use one of Peter Creek's books on heaven, and he talks about this sort of process of Christians in heaven moving, and these three stages overlap. Purgatory, which is in heaven, which overlaps with the communion of saints, which is basically the complete and full reconciliation among humans in heaven, and then the beatific vision. And you can't see God face to face fully until all of humanity has been reconciled, and you need to go through purgatory for that. So you wrote this paragraph, and it made me think of that, okay? Politics is, so you got about 7 seconds.
Check this up for last.
Politics is always incomplete, while friendship is complete in itself, in that it needs nothing else to deliver such satisfaction as possible here on earth. Of course, friendship is incomplete in its own way, in that it cannot make us perfectly whole. But this incompleteness differs in kind from the incompleteness of politics. Politics is incomplete because its work is never done. Friendship is incomplete only in as far as its complete success intimates something even higher, a kind of friendship with God that awaits us at the end of time. Those who understand what real friendship is and what it ultimately foreshadows will place less value in politics because they will have nothing better to do.
They will have better things to do.
They will have better things to do. They will know through experience where their deepest longings are most fully satisfied. So I'm looking at friendship in this world as a foreshadowing of a complete friendship in heaven.
I think that's a way we can interpret it, and I do interpret it that way. But and I don't mean to be perverse in coming back to this point, but what I'm wanting to stress as something useful for our present day differences is that I don't need that my friends view the value of friendship as, let's call that en passant, right? Where friendship is valuable, but its real value is here. I think that's true, but I also think that friendship is complete in itself, and that if we can engage as friends, the value of that doesn't require that we look to heaven. Do we agree on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I still do.
Right. So you see, the danger is that if we think the real value of friendship is in heaven, then we've just instrumentalized.
No, we don't want to instrumentalize friendship. No, I fully agree with that.
Okay.
Right. But you can't.
But it is in heaven.
Well, of course, I can't deny reality that I believe. But no, we don't use friendship in this world to get some sort of other friendship in another world. It's just that this friendship as an intrinsic good, from a Christian perspective, will be completed.
That's right.
When we're friends with God.
Yes, but I don't know if anybody ever feels this. I do, and I talk about it sometimes. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but even in the midst of, even among your best friends, I do think you retain a feeling that actually no one is loving you enough. You need more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I hope I wasn't too prickly. That was
No,
fun.
fantastic.
Okay, all right. You didn't know you were getting on here with a porcupine.
This was great. This was great. All right, we're gonna do the same format. Hopefully somebody's got something to say. Raise your hand. We'll crisscross. Are there mics over there, or does somebody need this mic? Do you have two mics? Oh, you got two. Okay. We'll get Brother Ben next, and then Wendy and. Yeah. Thank you for that.
All right, okay. Thank you for that. You and I had a conversation a little bit earlier today about people who don't live over at the Capitol. So Paul Irvin taught me years ago that one of the things that's changed about our politics is travel, and then you shared with me a little bit of just expectations of the constituency. So it used to be that when you were elected to office, you moved up here, your family and everything. And so you did life together, and you picked up your kids from ball practice and ballet and all these kind of things. And so different political parties learned how to live together in community, and the bills were hashed out in the hallway outside the ballet class and then passed on the floor over there. But then, as you mentioned also, the constituency expects people to be back home. So now we have the more and more the siloing by the culture we live in. I'm also thinking too about, you mentioned a little bit cancel culture and how social media has pushed us really quickly into an honor-shame society that I don't think we're ready for yet. So a lot of America deals out of this guilt and innocence sort of thing. But honor and shame says you're either in the community or you're out. And I can welcome you into my social media community, but I can also kick you out just as fast. In evangelical circles, we were very comfortable for a long time talking about loving sinners and hating sin. But generations coming after us say, no, in order to love it, you have to accept everything that I identify with and want to do. So I think that's bled over into our politics as well, because now if I hold one value, then I either have to accept all of the values of the red or the blue or whatever that is. So I'm thinking about as leaders in churches or institutions, about how we can help people who really don't have a framework for the kind of friendships you're talking about, particularly as we head into this election year. That there's just this, it's already happening in my church, there's this tension going on. And in small groups where we're supposed to watch over one another in love, there are real deep discussions going on about politics and this sort of thing, and they're not even getting to the biblical frameworks of how they love one another. So can you give us some help on how we can have people, guide people who have little framework for these kind of things into the very real reality of how they live their lives in their churches and workplaces and homes?
Thank you. It's a good question. Let me give three thoughts, three very, very brief answers to that. As we're coming into the season of elections, stop speaking on social media. I recommend you stop looking at it, because it's very hard not to get drawn in. Secondly, try as much as possible to speak to people, especially if you assume you don't agree politically, one-on-one, eye to eye, vulnerable person to vulnerable person with no audience. And thirdly, confess your ignorance to this person about the ultimate right answers to political problems. And you are ignorant. Show them the courtesy of admitting your ignorance, and you'll find the conversation gets going on a sort of different footing from the start. Those three things, the last one being quite a Socratic achievement, to know that you're not a knower. I don't think giving us, I've said this once before in a public setting, I don't think being Christian gives us a special epistemological political powers. Because we're Christian, we can't go tell the experts over at Brookings, step aside, a real knower is here now. And for that reason, I sometimes think we as Christians suppose that by virtue of our relationship with Jesus, that we have powers that we actually don't have. Jesus didn't tell us how to manage public policy. So those three things, I think they're really vital, especially that Socratic piece. You can't do the Socratic piece on social media, but you can do it one-to-one. I note that Socrates spoke to people one-on-one. Jesus tended, with one or two very significant exceptions, not to speak to crowds, but to speak to people one-on-one.
Great. Ben, did you have a question or?
Yes.
Joy's got it.
I have it. Okay. Wow. Thank you. That was great. Thank you. That was great. I so wanted to be up there in the middle of that. I think I have two questions. The first question is, would you give me time? I want to just have a one-on-one with you since you just said that. No, my question, you made a comment and it really struck me, and I wrote something down and I want to see what you want to do with that. So you were saying something about the utopian idea of what it means to love and coming to this Christian expression of love, the way that we've kind of described it. And I heard a question of, so what does that love look like, or what would it look like? And what I wrote down as an answer is this, the kind of love that would, which I try to practice that you described across those lines with folks that disagree, that I disagree with and they disagree with me, but maintaining a friendship with, is that love generically, not to the individual that I can look eye to eye, but a Christian love would be a love that does not hurt, a love that does not hate, and a love that does not ignore the other. What do you say to that?
Well, I like that very much. I think a way in your own mind, I do this in my own mind, to enter that space is to remember that despite so many accounts of how different we all are, we are actually co-sufferers of the human condition. And very concretely, that human condition includes our ignorance. We're co-sufferers of not knowing the right answers. We're co-sufferers of injustice, not only personally experiencing it, but seeing others experiencing it and perpetrating it. We do that too. And I think and I've got a list of some things that we're co-sufferers of, but this is not that talk. But I think when you realize, when you set aside what are supposedly our differences, and recognize that actually those differences stem from these problems that we co-suffer. Lastly, and in my preaching mode here, it's not a coincidence that the exact 5 things we co-suffer, Jesus promises to answer. Right? So he's speaking not to our political controversies, but to our existential controversies of what we co-suffer. Death, mortality is another one. I'm not going to go to them all, but we all are dying. And we're all struggling to have an account that what we did while we were here had some kind of meaning. And we disagree over how to do that, and we're at odds with each other over that. Jesus promises eternal life. It's a equation changer. I think sometimes people are trying to find eternal life artificially in honor and in power and these other sort of fake eternities. But I like what you're doing, and I think all the 3 things you said are characteristic of actual love seem to me to be relating to another person in light of our shared suffering. Does that sound right?
Yes, and if I may, the context that I thought I heard when you were saying that was that we couldn't do it in a generic collective. And for me, that felt like the conversation was the church is commanded to love. And I thought the answer was, we can't exactly do that. And my response is, what would it look like? And what it would look like is not harming, not hating, because,
Now that you give me the context, I think
Yeah.
you're right, but that's fine as a sort of baseline way of thinking about agape across a vast number of people that I can't know them all personally.
Right.
But yours is it's like a bare negative minimum. Certainly agape requires more than that I not hate you, et cetera, right? So what positively does it require? And my comment about the limits of being able to do agape far and wide is that you cannot be positively engaged with every human being in a way that is equivalent to friendship.
oh,
Yeah, I think that was my context if we're talking about the same spot. But to have an openness towards the possibility of loving other people would be the baseline that you give would have to be the basic posture that you have towards other people.
Okay, let's, Wendy,
He's next. He's just telling you he's next.
Yeah,
okay,
because I have to go do a podcast.
Sister Wendy's after Ben, okay.
Thank you so much for that. It reminded me of C.H. Dodd's characterization of Jesus' parables. It's meant to tease the mind into active thought, and you've certainly done that, so that's a very high bar. I want to talk to you about multiple different kinds of love for just a second. Proximate loves. My college roommate and I have been friends for over 50 years. We're still good friends. He's in Boston and works with head trauma cases. And a good year for him is reteaching somebody 25 words that they've lost because of the damage to their brain. I don't have patience for that. But what we share in common is a profound, deep, and everlasting love of the Tar Heels. And I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. Okay? I also went to Duke, so I taught at Duke. But here's the thing.
You're canceled, Ben.
No, I will not accept that. I was teaching Wesley studies at Duke before you were even knee-high to a grasshopper. So, here's the thing. It's an undying love. It's a in sickness and health love. It's a till death do us part kind of love. It's not the ultimate kind of love that you're talking about as a love of God, but it's a real love. It's a profound, deep connection that I have with this person because we share a common love. Okay? So somewhere in our lexicon of talking about love and friendship, we have to have at least multiple kinds of loves and friendships, right? Now, he happens to be a very liberal Episcopalian. I am not that at all, okay? But it doesn't matter because what trumps that is our love for our basketball team and our love for each other, okay? So what do you say to these lesser kinds of loves that are nonetheless real and enduring and fun as well? What do you say to that?
First of all, I would say I wish you could sit in my shoes and know how funny you are to me for caring that much about sports. I have.
Bless your heart.
I have a little less than zero interest in sports, but the idea that something less than God and virtue could occupy the top of your triangle with your friend seems to be highly plausible. But I doubt you're being fair to that friendship. I think you love more than the sports in each other.
Of course. Of course we do. But this is what we talk about most all the time anyway. Yes, of course we love each other as persons. Of course we do.
Yeah.
That's true. And what we don't do is we don't talk about these radical political things we disagree on.
You don't have to.
Because we know where each other stands on it. And we know that the
That's okay.
lovely art of compromise, so-called, that's what politics is supposed to be, is not happening on these issues.
So this is an older form of relationship that I'm trying to throw a spotlight on and say, we need this again.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that because you know what it feels like to be this man's friend, politics is demoted.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying would happen if people recovered a sense of real friendship.
Well, praise the Lord, we agree.
Let the record state that Ben and David agree.
Any questions?
When-
Why?
Wendy, you've been very patient, and we'll try to. We started late. We'll go just a tad late if Steve lets us.
Yep.
There we go. Okay, first, thank you both. This mic is not on. It's on now. Okay. During the last presidential election, I overheard a political commentator make a statement which I thought was shocking, but it also explained a lot to me. And the statement was simply this: presidency is a blood sport. And so my question is, how does that speak of some kind of intrinsic value, as in sports are somehow that valuable, and how prevalent is that kind of notion within our culture?
Picking up on just a couple ideas there, my first thought was, yeah, y'all's obsession with sports is causing us political problems because you're viewing politics like sports. But I'd rather we view politics like sports than like a blood sport, because what's the difference? The difference is, in sports, your adversary is not your enemy. Because you agree on the rules. And you can't play the game without another side. An adversary is not an enemy that you want to eliminate. You want to defeat them, not to eliminate them. There's a difference. It doesn't seem like there's a difference. There's a difference between my wanting to defeat you and my wanting to kill you and eliminate you. So we look back on practices of politics where Obama can invite George Bush to the White House and show admiration and respect, to a version of politics where, why are you here? So blood sport is probably an accurate description of the way an awful lot of people view politics. It's bad enough they view it as sports, but to view it as blood sports, I think it's just another way of saying the problem, what I call the politics of war. It's just another way of saying, what is my relationship to the other side? I can't stand them and I want them to go away forever. I think that's right. So it's a diagnosis that we need to, it's an accurate diagnosis that we need to take very seriously.
Yeah, thank you. That's blood sport and totalizing war. Two more questions.
You got one over there and then one over here.
Well, we just,
Matthew, you've got the mic over there.
Yes. Thank you very much. I want to confess that maybe I didn't understand what you said very well, but I'm observing that that there is a possibility to make friends in a way that is groundless, like there's no ideological ground to it, no theological ground to it, and nothing at the basis for making the move toward other people to be friends, if I understand well. So I'm wondering if this is possible, really, given the fact that we have so many in our accumulated and known history that tells us that there have been ground to be, cultural ground, ideological ground to be in, to entertain the politics of enmity. So I'm picking on Achille Mbembe necropolitics, in which he is saying that even the modern democracy is rooted in the desire or the practice of eliminating or excluding other people.
Good.
So yeah, and so that's what. So since we are theologians here, I mean people who are Christians, I'm wondering if there is this theological worldview behind that posture, what that is not recognized and may look like an intellectual burden when that idea is spread that it is possible to have a groundless
I think I totally understand your question. It's a super smart question. Thank you for asking it.
Okay.
I love the way that you say it's groundless because it's not grounded on this and it's not grounded on this. I agree. I'm trying to make a kind of friendship that's not grounded on theological answers, that's not grounded on a shared conception of virtue. But I disagree that in the result, I'm talking about a form of friendship that's groundless. I'm not. It's grounded in something else. It's grounded in emotional sympathy for the co-sufferings that we all have because we're human. So the thing that's interesting, I'm grounding it in a perennial, universal problem, not in a shared answer. And that's why I think I'm on a strong footing. And because by nature, we are emotionally connected to each other, I cannot watch a person miserably suffer right in front of my eyes and not feel a sense of horror. That would have to be, you'd have to be an intellectual to do that. It's trained out of you. Most people do feel terrible when they see that. I don't think that's nothing. My view of friendship is not nihilist. It's grounded not in theology and metaphysics, but in the phenomenon of shared suffering.
So you are kind of a Buddhist then in that respect.
Holy cow.
Well,
I don't know what the Buddhists think the problem is.
suffering. Yes, compassion in co-suffering. It's very Christian too, but it's also Buddhist.
Shouldn't surprise me if religious answers to real problems overlap.
Exactly. Last question.
Is it on? Oh, yes. I think I've got a question that is formed. Based on kind of what Matthew was getting out and it being groundless, grounded in shared sufferings, my question really is, how can you be walking as a faithful follower of Christ who believes that the telos of all of this suffering is actually found in the love of Christ, in the Trinitarian love of God? How do you square that with a grounding that doesn't end at that telos? And I think the secondary question is, how do you square our call to evangelism with this understanding of friendship?
The Christian who engages friendship in this way cannot be sure that the person she's co-suffering with will find her way to that end. The end is there. Friendship is possible without the two expressly being committed to that end. But I think that for the part of us Christians, we're given a theological and religious command that encourages us to do what our nature could incline us to do anyway, because we're built with emotions and we're built with sympathy, because we care about another person like they are us. We're capable of that. We can do that without knowing why, but when Jesus calls us to love in that way, that's a tremendous revelational boost for us to pursue that way. I think we can relate to people exactly where their needs are, lovingly, selflessly, and that can be a witness. Do we have any guarantee that that witness leads the other person to the telos? We do not. But I don't know what we can do besides the witness. I think a lot of the rest is not in our hands. So I think that would constitute a kind of answer to your emerging question.
I think it actually redefines a little bit for me how we could imagine sharing the gospel.
You know, this morning, if we had only given Elizabeth and Esther 15 more minutes, they would have solved the work-life balance. And if Steve Moore only gave us 15 more minutes, we would solve the friendship politics dilemma. But alas, we don't have it. So, can you give David a big round of applause, please?
Ted. And just as a reminder, so you'll go into your groups now, and I see Elizabeth is back there and David's here. If one of the groups, you know, if you want to pull David into a group or pull Elizabeth into a group for a few minutes and ask them and pursue something, feel free to do that. I know that will throw them completely, and then they'll handle it fine. But we'll go for about 40 minutes in the groups. And then the groups will break up. You can walk back. Those of you who want to look at the scientific equipment that's here, if you'll hang around, then we'll get you connected and we'll be able to go do that at about 3 o'clock. And then remember tonight, you will want to pair up or get with 2 or 3 other people to take an Uber over to the American Enterprise Institute and to be over there by, I think, is it 5:30? Is that right? Yeah, 5:30. So you'll probably want to leave about 5:15, but you'll want to check Uber to see how long it will take you to get over there.
Steve,
Yes.
is there a parking area if someone has a car?
There is a parking garage nearby, right, Mal? And so those of you that have cars, if you can take a couple of people, that'll be great too. And those of you that are catching Uber, be sure to turn those receipts in and everything. So that's kind of the game plan. But we will convene at AEI. We won't be meeting here and then go over there. So you'll want to arrange transportation to get that together. Okay. The reception starts at 5:30. Any questions that people have on logistics or things like that? Yes, Esther.
Those of you who do want to ride share, I would say meet at the lobby at around 5 o'clock. So we can organize groups once we get there too, if you haven't quite organized a group yet.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Okay. Any other things? That sounds great. We'll let you break into your groups and have a good discussion, follow-up discussion.
Same group, yeah.